Okay, we're live. Hello, everyone. I'm Nicholas Chan, reporter with Being Patient, and welcome to our live talk. And today we'll be talking to Doreen Monks, who is a retired nurse practitioner diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's at the age of 63 in 2016. And Doreen, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Yeah, so Doreen, before we talk about your journey living with the disease, I just want to ask you, because you're a retired nurse practitioner, can you tell us a little bit about how you chose that being a nurse as a career path? What inspired you?
I don't know if it was anything particular. I knew I wanted to be in healthcare. I did some volunteering as a youngster, and I enjoyed the environment. And I thought I would be best in nursing. It gave me a good opportunity to use science and the art of care. And then one day I was walking, and I went to visit an uncle in the hospital, and I was walking down the hallway, and I thought, wow, I belong here. And that was really when I decided, okay, I really want to be a nurse. And that was a long time ago. And I hung in there.
Right. And like during your work as a nurse practitioner, you were like more specifically a neuroscience nurse practitioner.
Correct.
Can you tell us a
Yes.
little bit about like what your work was as a neuroscience?
I spent most of my, I got my master's in 1978. And most of my time was spent with patients with stroke. Stroke care management, prevention and treatment and follow-up care. I started the program at a local hospital, so we had which is now is functioning. It's certified and doing well without me. So that was really what my primary role was. Some administration, much clinical as I could get in, because to me that was the meat of it all.
Right. And as we talked about a little bit before this interview, you mentioned that you also took care of like dementia patients too, right? Because
right. Well, as a subsequent to stroke, many patients, because multiple strokes, will develop vascular dementia, which is obviously, I believe it's the second most common form of dementia behind Alzheimer's disease. So it was not unbeknownst to me what, certainly I had taken care of patients as a bedside nurse with multiple forms of dementia. And certainly as a nurse practitioner saw, a fair amount of patients with vascular dementia as well.
Right. And for some of the early symptoms of Alzheimer's, can you tell us a little bit about, around what age you start experiencing those early symptoms?
I was, in a retrospect, it was probably when I was about 60. It's amazing here. I've been a neuroscience nurse forever, and I had somebody else to tell me what was going on. Memory was not the issue. In fact, my memory remains fairly intact, given that I'm going to be 69. But it's mostly executive functioning things. So putting order to things, following up on complex processes, those became problematic. And I was having more difficulty at work, particularly with administrative issues. And that's really what was the thing that sparked the conversation, which ended up, with the start of the diagnostic process.
Right. And was it the case that like colleagues would point out to you that?
Yeah, I was lucky. I worked with a neurologist, one of the best neurologists I've ever known. And that's saying much after 40 something years. And she was the one who literally knocked on my door one morning and said, we have to talk. And she said, these are some of the things that I'm seeing. And I'm concerned that you're having some cognitive issues. And that really, I will be forever grateful to her, because, that brought about the diagnosis much earlier than most people are diagnosed. So, it was very fortunate, for me.
Right. And before you were diagnosed, and did you have like any inkling of like what?
Well, I was getting more and more frustrated with the administrative work. And I thought at first it's because I didn't like it. It was not, I'm a bedside person. But then an interesting thing happened. I had a study coordinator who worked for me. and we were involved in a drug research study. And when you enroll patients, you get a stipend. And she came in looking for this check that we were supposed to get from them. And I said, no, we haven't gotten it yet. She came back, a week later. She said, no, we haven't gotten it. I said, in fact, you should, this is now 3 weeks goes on. And I said, you better call them and see what happened. And she came back in rather sheepishly and said, Doreen, not only did we get the check, you deposited it. Now, to this day, I have no recollection of that. And what happened, and I couldn't put two and two together. So on my desk was a folder with that drug company on it. And that's where I had in there the slip. But it never dawned on me, the next logical step to the question is look in the folder and you'll find the deposit slip. So that was that will always remind, as much as I can always be able to remember, that is always in my forefront of that was the most obvious thing to me. And then one time I couldn't remember how many 60 seconds were in a minute. I had to look it up. So there's little glitches when at first you think it's nothing, but you put them together and obviously it's something.
Right. There were just like all these red flags coming out.
Yeah, little things. One time I couldn't remember what finger I put my ring on. My mother bought me a clatter ring when I got my master's degree in '78. I put it on the same finger since then. And one morning it took me 20 minutes to figure out what finger I put the ring on. Again, you put this together and that, you say, well, of course, why didn't you notice that? But some things like this, most of the time it's somebody else noticing it first.
Right. And can you run us through then the whole diagnostic process? And because it took,
Lord,
it was not a short period of time.
No, it was a long time. I think we had the discussion about the symptoms on Thursday. That Monday I went to my primary care physician, which it's really the first thing you have to do. And I'm blessed with a phenomenal primary care physician. She said, I'm not a neuropsychologist, so here's what we're going to do. You're going to go for an MRI and you're going to go see the neuropsychologist. And that was the beginning of the process. And then after the neuropsychologist I subsequently had to get a neurologist, and then it was multiple scans, blood work to, basically in the beginning they rule out anything that can be fixed. Many times Alzheimer's is, up until recently, it's really been a diagnosis of exclusion. So all those things that could be excluded were excluded. And finally I went for a PET scan about a year and a half after this process started. And that was really the final diagnosis.
And this is like a normal PET, not an amyloid?
Not an amyloid PET scan, just a routine PET scan.
Got it. And it was in 2016 that your diagnosis was finalized.
April 2016.
April. I mean, how did you react like at the doctor's office?
Well, no, I'll tell you what happened. This is my bit of a problem I have with sometimes, depending on certain people in the medical profession. I went for the PET scan, I'm going to say 9 o'clock in the morning. I got back to my to the hospital where I was working, I'm going to say 10:30, and as I'm pulling into the parking lot, I get a text from the physician who says, call me. I'm still in the car. I call him, and he said, I'll call you right back. And he calls me right back. And he says to me, it's Alzheimer's disease. I'll see you next week in the office. And that was how I got my diagnosis. Now, I don't know, I didn't react. I text my friend, the neurologist and the NP, that it was a friend of mine, and she said, I'll meet you in your office and we'll look at the PET scan together. So I got the support I needed from them, so I didn't need his help.
Got it. And and so when you were looking at the results with your neurologist friend,
it's startling because you literally have these, the PET scan, measures the uptake of glucose activity in your brain. In areas that aren't functioning, there's no glucose activity. So I have these black holes basically in my brain. And I'm like, the neuro person in me is like, wow, this is fascinating. And I'm looking at it, like, oh my God, I can't believe this is my brain. I should be sitting in the corner someplace. But it was just, I have, so it was startling from a professional aspect, obviously, and a personal aspect as well. But I was happy at that point to have an answer, because we've been back and forth. Is it Alzheimer's? Is it frontotemporal dementia? Is it something else? Is it this? Is it that? And finally, to have an answer to me was almost a relief, because then I knew what I was fighting. You know, I knew who the enemy was.
Got it. Oh, so was it an FDG PET scan specifically that looks at like the metabolism in the brain?
Yeah.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, so you mentioned it's in many ways it was actually a relief to finally.
Well, yeah, you know, because you don't know, you're living in limbo for a year. You know, I can't figure out what to do next because I don't know what's the thing between now and next. You know, so it was a relief to know. Okay, well now this is what I have to deal with. You know, and meanwhile, I had been following up with the neuropsychologist. At that point, I think I had 3 neuropsych tests. And she was the one, before even the PET scan was done, saying, you know, obviously, you got to stop working. The stress is too much. It's making the symptoms worse. I was having a hard time functioning from a higher executive function level because of the stress of work. So when I finally got the results of the PET scan, I said, okay, now I know what I have to do.
Got it.
Which was to move on.
And you know, just shortly in 2016, after you received that final diagnosis, you retired.
Correct. In June of 2016.
And you know, you mentioned that retiring was difficult. Can you tell us?
Well, you know, I'm a single woman. I was expecting to work until they found me at the desk. You know what I mean? Like that was my passion, was my work. I certainly wasn't expecting to retire at 63. I wasn't expecting to sell the house that I really liked. Like I said to you, you get the diagnosis and literally the world stops. And it's a clean slate now. So whatever you were looking forward to, or however you visioned your life at the next year and the year after that, that's all gone. You know, so whatever 5-year plan you had, or 2-year plan, or 1-year plan is out the window. So now you have to start all over again, sort of reset your life for going forward.
Right. And, you know, can you tell us a little bit about like what are some aspects in your life now that
first of all, I'm not working, so I don't have that pressure. I have found a new passion, and that's Alzheimer's disease and all things Alzheimer's. I feel very blessed in some way that I was diagnosed early. So it's given me, I'm highly functional. I'm independent in most things. I have, anything that's stressful is auto paid and taken care of by my friends. So I'm able to go about, doing education. I said to you, most people get diagnosed and they think that's it. I'm dead, and it's not a death sentence. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, right now, until we find a treatment and certainly a cure, you will die from it. But I'm not, I'm taking care of all that business. I did all the legal stuff early on in my diagnosis. I have a living will, a regular will. I have a healthcare proxy. My will is in order. I mean, all those things that you have to worry about at the end, I've taken care of. So now I have the time to go and forth and say, listen, if you get diagnosed, who's happy? Nobody's happy. But you know what? You can have. I mean, I have just as much of a good day. I mean, every day I get up and I think it's going to be a good day. And I'm going to I'll interact. I go with my friends. I go to meetings. I do some lecturing. I'm chatting with folks like yourself. So there's a new passion in my life, and I'm very grateful for that.
Right. And as we talked about, like there are 2 particular good friends that have really kept you.
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't know where I'd be without either one of them. Certainly my friend, the neurologist. She not only helped me to get diagnosed, but she has literally streamlined my life to the point where literally there are no stressors on me. I mean, she takes care of my financial issues, legal issues. She's my go-to person if I'm not sure about something. So she's just made life so much easier. And my other friend is my day-to-day friend. She keeps an eye out after me. We go out shopping together. She's just my girl, my friend. We hang out together. I get invited to her house, and I watch football with her husband. We have a great time. So I'm very blessed for the two of them. One keeps me out of trouble, and the other one, puts a little bounce in my day.
Right. Like, as you mentioned, right, like early on, you've got all your affairs in order, like
Right.
living well and all those things, so you can concentrate on other important things.
Right. If you go to the website, Alzheimer's Association website, there's literally, and look for newly diagnosed, there's literally a checklist. And I sat religiously with that checklist. I went through every single thing on that. And that little form got me through the first 6 months, at least.
So you would,
after I was diagnosed.
You would advise like families and.
Oh yeah, I mean, there are many, many resources out there that are good, but this is the gold standard, Alzheimer's Association's website. Everything you ever wanted to know, they have a 24-hour hotline, but there's reams of information available to you on that website. And like I said, I mean, literally, I have somewhere tucked away in some box someplace, I still have the checklist that I checked off everything that I was supposed to do.
Right. And
I never thought I had to go find an elder lawyer. I was like, what the heck is that? Then I figured, that was the first thing I did, it was to find a lawyer, and she's been phenomenal. So, I mean, it puts some direction in what is a very chaotic point in your life.
Right. Because these are all like new, like finding an elder law attorney.
Yes. I mean, I wasn't expecting to do that at 63. I had a will. I mean, but it was old, I never thought about revamping it. I certainly wasn't expecting to find a healthcare proxy. It was fine. I mean, at that point, I thought that was something I would do when I was in my 70s, not in my 60s.
And, you talked about how, how receiving an Alzheimer's diagnosis isn't a death sentence.
No.
But that's, I think, unfortunately, for a lot of patients and families, that's what they do feel like shortly after a diagnosis. And
it's certainly understandable. I'm not saying I didn't jump, do cartwheels because I got diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. But like I said to you, I realized I had two choices. I'm either going to I'm going to wallow in the corner and wait for the archangels to come, or I'm going to do something about it. And I learned a different life. And the point is I don't know when the other shoe's going to fall. It could be tomorrow. It could be 10 years. I could be 80 years old and still talking about, oh my God, when is I don't know what's going to happen next. And that's the thing. It's like, if you plan for the bad end, and then you get to live the good part, you get to live from today until whenever, and you can have a good life. It's a little different. It's not the same life you thought you were going to have, and it may take a little more work. And I'm not saying that things don't progress, because the disease will progress, and you're going to have to make adaptations to your life as you go along. But that doesn't mean today you can't have a good day. You can't have a good life today, and you can. I can say that with as much fervor as I can admit, that I miss the old life, but I'm happy with the new life.
Got it. And as you say, right, like things change, and it's been some years since you noticed the earliest symptoms of your disease. I was wondering, like, what about now then, from the day to day? What are
I don't have things are things that have that are complex processes, take me a little longer. I have to pay more attention to. I'm more easily distracted by things, and being almost 69 doesn't help. So I'm more distracted. I can get lost in the process of sometimes, like I love to cook, but if it's a new recipe, I have to work harder at it. Things that used to be, kind of rote to me, I have to pay more attention to. Driving is fine. I have no problems driving. Thank God for GPS. My GPS's name is Doris. She keeps me on the road. But so those things, I have some. It's hard to believe, but I do have some word finding difficulties sometimes. So I have to kind of beat around the bush a little bit until I get the right word out. But for the most part, the changes have been minimally annoying,
Got it.
And everybody tells me I can't, I get, which is sometimes a little frustrating. Oh, you can't possibly have Alzheimer's disease, or I could never tell you have to. I actually took a picture of my PET scan. It's on my phone, so I could prove to people that I really have it. But again, you have the opportunity to do well. For as long as you can be well. I guess that's the key. Do as well as you can while you're well enough to do it.
Got it. And one point you brought up before this interview is that Alzheimer's has been in the corner for too long. Can you tell us a little bit about what
I'm frustrated. I know if you look back, 1906, when Alois Alzheimer identified the first woman, 50-year-old woman, who they ended up doing. He was a nurse. He was a psychiatrist, and on autopsy they found plaque on this woman's brain. It took to 1996, I believe, for the first med to come out. Then that had suggested that it might slow down the progression of the disease, but there was no clarity to that. And meanwhile, I had a melanoma before, so God bless the people who are working through a diagnosis of cancer and HIV, AIDS, and heart disease. But so much in the time that nothing happened to Alzheimer's disease, even though it affects so many people, so much has progressed in those other diseases. They're not death sentences. Just because you get diagnosed with either HIV, AIDS, or cancer, or heart disease doesn't mean you're going to die. So the end result is not known, basically, with those diagnoses. And it's time for the research and the monies to go towards the research to come forward and say, we have to take care of the 6 million and plus people in America who have the diagnosis just as much as we have to take care of those other people. But I think too long, everybody just said it was Alzheimer's disease. Well, there's nothing to do about it, so we won't talk about it. And it's time to talk about it. And this is one of the reasons why I do. I mean, people say, well, gee, do you want everybody to know? I don't care how many people know, because if more and more people know that I have it, then more and more people are going to tell other people they have it. And then we can speak up for ourselves with the government and with the financial institutions and say, we are just as valuable as all those other people. We're worth the time, the effort, and the money to find a treatment and to find a cure. Because literally, there has never been a survivor of Alzheimer's disease.
Right.
It's frightening. And appalling, actually.
And looking at like the the drug pipeline now, like are you optimistic or?
Well, there's some legislative issues that are impacting the possibilities. It takes money. We're at the precipice. There's a drug class called monoclonal antibodies, and one was just FDA approved. It's not for everybody. There's a very select Aduhelm, which is the brand name. It's not for everybody. It's going to be a select group of people. The cost is outstanding. So there's a lot of work for that, but it's the fact that it exists right down the pipeline or because once you open the door, the other drugs will come along the pipeline that will affect more people and be more efficacious than the Aduhelm is, and so, but you have to let that door open. If you put the kibosh on it, then we're literally saying to 6 million people, you're not worth our time or our money. And that's, to me, is appalling. So I'm very hopeful. As far as the research is concerned, I'm very concerned as far as the federal government supporting that research. And again, that's my opinion.
And Doreen, last question for you then, especially for you as a former nurse practitioner, what do you think are some ways that healthcare providers, like clinicians, can do better in terms of like taking care of patients living with Alzheimer's or other forms?
Well, first of all, I think there's the key to solving this, the problem with this disease or identifying this is early diagnosis. too many times. People are diagnosed when the disease is fairly well advanced, where almost everybody notices that there's a problem with my mom or my grandmother or my sister or my daughter. The key has to be early diagnosis. So I think it behooves, the healthcare, your healthcare provider, to really do early screenings. I mean, we do, once a year we do an EKG, and we do lipids, and we do this and we do that, and later on they do a stress test. Why aren't we doing at least mini mental status exams once a year? So so next year maybe there's a little bit of a glitch, and you pick that up faster. But if you wait, and and the thing is, the other thing, I hope that more care providers become more conscious of the reaction to the, somebody goes to the doctors and they say, I'm a little concerned about my memory, or I'm a little, it's hard for me to do things. Oh, don't, and you get the response to many times is, oh, don't worry about it, you're okay. Or that's normal, you're getting older. Well, dementia is not a normal process of getting older. It's not. Your brain doesn't, shrivel up and die just because you got older. So I think that, the healthcare, certainly the primary healthcare providers need to be more cognizant and be more accepting. If somebody comes to me and says, I think I have something with my memory, problem with my memory, that should get investigated, not poo-pooed.
Mm-hmm. And how about in terms of, clinicians delivering a diagnosis and offering a roadmap for patients?
Well, I can only talk about my experience. The reason I was able to develop a plan was because of my friend, the neurologist, not the neurologist taking care of me. I got a phone call in my car saying, you have Alzheimer's disease. That was the fun. Obviously, I met with him. We had talked about the diagnosis. He told me what he thinks it was, and we did a bunch of studies, and a bunch of more studies, and a couple more studies. But when it was the PET scan was the final diagnosis, I got that on a phone call into my car. It said, you have Alzheimer's disease, and I'll see you in the office. What was I supposed to? And then I got a prescription for a med. Now I'm lucky because I had the support that I had, and I had enough experience as a nurse practitioner to say, okay, I know what I have to do, but that's a very small portion of the population. It's going to be, people working, in law and in the shop right, and the plumbers and electricians and people who are working hard and suddenly are met with this. When you give, if you have a diagnosis of cancer, okay, this is what you have, navigators who walk you through the diagnosis. Why can't we have something like that for somebody without Alzheimer's disease? Say, this is the diagnosis and this is what we need to do. Easy enough.
Got it. And yeah, is there anything else you'd like to add, Doreen, that I haven't asked?
No, I just think that I think people need to be more aware of the diagnosis, aware of where the federal government is focusing on the care, support the efforts of the Alzheimer's Association and other organizations who are trying to provide for a better diagnosis and treatment, and certainly a cure. If at any point, if you think you have a problem, whether it's your memory or it's your, the way you're thinking or anything, and you have a problem, don't hide. Go to your primary care physician and say, this is what I think is going on. I need you to help me figure out what it is. Because again, the earlier diagnosis, the more likely we can institute treatment. And again, let you plan your life before somebody else does it.
Got it. Well, thank you so much, Doreen,
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And
you're very welcome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye,
And
Nicholas.
for the audience, if you've missed this interview and would like to hear more about our upcoming talks, don't forget to sign up for our newsletter on beingpatient.com. And thank you for watching. Thank you again, Doreen. Bye.
Bye-bye.